Welcome to this Code Rage 10 session, Understanding the IDE and Platform Assistance Server Toolchain. Hi, I'm David I, and I'm here with Boen. Hi, Hin.
Hi, Dave.
And great. Why don't you tell people a little bit about what you do in R&D?
I work on the debugger. Also, I work on part of the IDE, and then I mainly write the PAServer itself.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go right into what is the PAServer, and maybe you could just tell everybody from your perspective.
Yeah,
what
the
it is.
PAServer is basically, the idea was IDE is run in the Windows platform, so we somehow would be able to debug or run an app on the other platform, which is non-Windows. In this case, we write a PAServer so that we will use PAServer to as if the machine in the Mac or in the other platform as if it's part of your extension of your Windows machine. That's what the PAServer is all about.
And so the idea was you create a project or load a project. If you want to hit run or you want to hit trace into, that it's the same experience whether you're on a Windows machine in your development environment or you're deploying and debugging or running an application on all these different devices and target platforms.
Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah, will be as if the other machine, non-Windows machine, is a part of your machine. So that's what it's for.
Now, years ago, we also had the remote debugger, right? And the remote debugger allowed the IDE to talk to another Windows machine to do remote debugging. Let's say you're building a server app. You need to talk to your Windows server, not your development environment machine. So we had the remote debugger. This takes remote debugging and goes way beyond it to deal with all the things we have to do in this multi-platform environment.
That's correct. Like in the old way, you have to copy the file by yourself, and then you have to make sure everything is completely set it up in the remote machine. You run the debugger over there. But using PAServer, everything is transparent as if you work on the local machine.
Okay. And again, if all you're going to do is do work on a Windows machine and you're in the IDE and you're building Windows applications, you can do it all on one single machine. You don't need PAServer. You don't need anything else. You can do it all from the IDE, right?
Yeah, in this case, you don't need to. Yeah, you just pure your Windows machine only. Yeah.
But if let's say I'm building a Win64 application, but I have a Win32 machine, then I'm going to need to use the PAServer running on a Win64 target. So the IDE, which would be running on a Win32 machine, for example, needs to talk to a separate Win64 machine.
Yeah, in that case, yeah, you have to run PAServer. Yeah, so what PAServer does will bridge that machine to your Win32 machine. So as far as you see, will be I just work on in this quote-unquote Win32 machine. Somehow my app still run anyway. And
there's two installs. There's an install for Windows for the PAServer, right? And
That's
an
correct.
Install for Mac OS X?
That's correct, yeah.
A package file, okay. And then from that, you can run and debug and deploy applications from your IDE, wherever it's running, Win32, Win64, to all the target nodes that we choose, which is Win32, Win64, OS X, and iOS. What about Android? I don't see Android on the list. What goes on with Android?
Okay, Android also, internally we use like a hidden PAServer. We don't run the PAServer, but the technique of copying the file still stay the same. The only difference will be, since you copy from window to window in the same host where the IDE is located, so we do it behind the scene.
And that's because we have, when you install the Android SDK NDK, we do that install, and we have a Windows version of the SDK NDK, so all the tools and everything we need are running on the same machine.
That's correct, yeah.
As the IDE. There is the notion of remote debugging on Android and remote connection and Wi-Fi and other things, but from a development standpoint, you just connect your Android device through a USB cable right on your machine.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. So behind the scene, we use a PAServer technology to copy file around and then be able to connect to your Android device and debug them.
Let's go into the IDE, because there's a few things that you need to do to get your environment set up if you're new to the IDE or new to a new version like Rad Studio 10 Seattle. And what I've done over the previous releases and also in this release, on the welcome page in the tutorials area, I've got a couple videos for how to set up your development environment, your Windows machine for Android development and for iOS and OS X development. But I'm not going to play those videos. We'll go through the steps here and show everybody what they have to do. So one of the first things to do if you're going to do, for example, Windows development is you just create a new project and run and everything's fine. So if you're going to target a remote target and you need the PA server or the Windows PA server or the PA server for Macintosh, we deliver it in the Rad Studio install, which is installed into Program Files x86 Embarcadero Studio 17.0. In that 17.0 folder, there's another folder called PAServer.
Yeah.
And here's the two. There's the PKG file, and we copy that over to our Macintosh and just install it.
Them, yeah.
And then here's the Windows version, right, to set a setup program for the PA server on Windows.
On Windows platform, yes.
And that's for Win32 or Win64.
Or
right?
Win64, yeah, that's correct.
And the way how does the IDE communicate to the target PA server platform?
Okay, so you run the PA server first in the remote machine after you install them, and then from the IDE you define we call it connection profile. So from that you will tell them what the host machine is, what the port number you want to talk to, and then that's it. And then you just hit connect, it will work by itself. So if you go to the tools menu and then options, and then you'll see like a connection profile that will allow you to define the remote machine that you want to talk to.
Okay. So I can click add here and I can give it a name and then I can target 32-bit, 64-bit Windows OS X.
Yes.
Okay. And again, I don't need Android because that's taken
Android
care
you don't
of
need
for
to
me
because
under the
it's
covers.
locally within itself.
Okay. So if I wanted to target a 64-bit Windows machine, I'll give it my Win64 target, something like that, and then give it an IP address. So I forget what my IP address on this machine is. It could be on the same machine if you want to separate the two.
Yeah, you can do in the same machine too, yeah. In the same machine, usually we just type in localhost, that will do it too.
Oh, and it'll take it. Okay. And then you can choose whatever port number you want, right?
That's correct.
Why would someone want a password?
The password is, okay, the reason I add the password in there so that if you don't use a password, I mean, I can technically see if I know you have a PA server running over there, I can just connect to your PA server machine. I can pull some file if I want to, or put some file in your machine if I want to. So some people might not want that to be for security reason. We add a password there. So you might say, okay, I only want to give to certain people that can deploy to my machine, nobody else. So.
Okay. And then once we've done all of this, we can test the connection. Oh, I don't have platform assistance. I have to install it on my Win64 machine. Well, I already have the IDE, but that's the process of going and creating another connection.
That's correct.
Now I've got my OS 10 machine over here with an IP address, and again, I've already put the platform assistance server. So let's.
Why don't we go to the Mac?
So here I'm on my Mac, and what I've done is over in my applications folder, I've installed the PAServer, and it shows up down here. I actually have the PAServer from Rad Studio 10 Seattle, and I have from XE8 as well.
Okay.
And I like to create aliases for things, so I've created an alias, and I put it on my desktop so I can start each one. See. It just makes my life easier. So let's go and start the Rad Studio 10 Seattle Platform Assistant Server. First thing it'll do is it says, I don't want any passwords, so we'll say OK. Now, if I had a new machine, if I had just started my Macintosh, it would have asked me at this point to key in my password because the PAServer needs to do something with the operating system?
No, we will acquire to the permission to support debugging, not the password, but for the permission to support debugging. That will be the first time we will ask you that. In this case, you have to type in your admin password. The reason is in the Macintosh, when you want to debug some other app, the OS required to have a permission to do so. So that's why we're going to ask you to fill in the data first so that when you debug an app, we don't ask you anymore the second time.
Okay, and I had done that earlier today, so I had already given it permission the first time, so it just said permission succeeded, right? So the next thing I do is I'll hit question mark and I get some commands. One of those commands I care about is I for the internet address.
That is very useful so that you know the address of the machine that you want to connect to from the Windows machine. So you don't have to type any other command.
So this is 20.5.36.
Yeah, so this number looks correct, yeah.
And it looks correct, so I can just test the connection. If I didn't have the PAServer working, it would give me an error saying there's no PAServer at that IP address or name or whatever it might be. But
yeah, that's correct.
In this case, it's correct and it's all good. So the second thing that the PA server is involved in is setting up the SDKs for your target applications, right?
Yeah, so when you want to synthesis, if you want to debug, or not debug, to compile the multi-platform app, we do require to have the header file, the library file for you to compile them to link it in. Yes, we do have like a cross-platform compiler, but we still need the library and then the header file from the remote machine so that we can link the file together. So this is what this is for, to pull the SDK.
And I previously added things from iOS device. Here I have the 8.4 and the 9.0. I'm up to 9.0.2 now on my iPhone. Same thing for Macintosh. I just upgraded to El Capitan, so I have 10.11 versus the Yosemite 10.10.3. Android Simulator 9.0, Simulator 8.4. You can click the Add button, choose the platform we want. Maybe I've got a different type, and choose the SDK, add a new one, or I can go back here, an iOS device. It knows my connection profile. That's my name of my computer and the IP address. And I only have iPhone iOS 9 over there, so there's nothing special. There's nothing new to add. If I had a new target operating system or version on another target device, I just use the Add button.
That's correct. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I also needed to do is when I went from 8.4 to 9.0, when I added, it would go and grab the paths to all of these files, the libraries, the header files, and so on, right?
Yeah, we have we call like a predefined SDK file installed in your machine. When you install the IDE, we already have like a predefined SDK file. So when you add an SDK, we automatically know what the file that we want to pull from the other machine to the window machine. So if some file is missing, for example, because you want to have some framework that you want to use, you can click on the Add button there, then to define your framework or your library path, whatever you want, so you can go from there.
And if you've made any changes on your target system that might have changed something to do with libraries or header files, whether it's Windows or Android or whatever, I can click the Update Local File Cache, and it'll just go and
we will re-pull the file again. Only the file that we know it has been modified, then we pull them. So the second time you pull, it should be very fast.
Okay, and all of this is calling again through TCP/IP from the IDE to the platform assistance server, wherever it's running.
That's correct.
Okay. There's several options. When I hit that question mark, we got the it gave us help about the options, and there's you can decide what port you want to use, the default 642.1.1. The scratch directory. What is the scratch directory used for?
Yeah, the concept scratch directory will be, we would like to have a one PA server can be connected by two different users. So in this case, we create a concept of scratch directory where in this scratch directory, we will create a subdirectory called like a user A and then another user B. Within user A itself, they can have a different profile. So we can put a different subdirectory on top of that. But we want to lump sum all this together in one directory so that it's very easy to find it. We call it like a scratch derp. So that's what this is for.
For me, I was doing a presentation in Denmark, and it was an all-day event, and some of the people in the audience had their Windows notebook computers with them, but they didn't have a Macintosh, and they didn't have an iOS device. So what I did is I put my Mac on the network and my device on there, and I gave them different connections so that they could do their development, or their deployment and debugging by having their own little scratch directories, and take control of what was going on the Macintosh and the device. So multiple developers in different IDs, maybe sharing a Mac, connecting to different devices.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned to me a long time ago, and I forget now, we can have multiple devices, right? Like I've got an iPhone, maybe an iPad or two iPhones. We can connect those to our Macintosh through a hub or USB ports.
Yeah, you can connect as many as devices you want. PAServer will detect it, and then we will report that information back to the IDE, and then we'll list all the devices that has been connected to your Mac machine.
So in my case, if I just said, let's just build a new multi-device application, simple one, could be Delphi or C++, doesn't matter. If I go to the target platform and I, let's say, go to iOS device 64-bit, it knows my iPhone is connected because what the IDE went through the PA server to
query what
what
the device
devices
that's being attached to your Mac.
Okay. And if I plugged I don't have my hub connected, but if I plugged my iPad Air 2, I'd see both of those.
Yeah.
Or any number of them if you've got a big hub with lots of devices connected.
That's correct.
And the same thing for Android. I've got my Samsung Galaxy S4 connected, so it knows how to find it.
We know how to find
under the covers. Okay. Some of these other commands, is there anything else to...
Yeah. This one is kind of important. Unrestricted, by default, we have this option, to be false. By doing so, that means because the PAServer allows you to copy the file, to delete the file, to get the file from the remote machine. So by default, I have this unrestricted option to be off. By doing so, that means if you connect to my machine, you will not be able to delete my file or pull any file without my permission. So that's what this is for.
And ultimately, you can specify these options on a command line, but you also can have a configuration file, right?
Yeah. All these options listed in here can be specified in the config file so that you don't have to retype them again every time you run PAServer.
Okay.
Yeah, this will be the command after you run PAServer. We allow you to stop the PAServer to see what client is connected to your PAServer at this moment, to print the port number, list all the IP address. And then if you don't know where your scratch directory is, so you can type S, it will print out what the current scratch directory is. Just in case you want to have a password, you can generate a login pass file. You don't give your password to somebody else, but you give them a pass file so that the other client, the other person that wants to connect to your PAServer, they can use this pass file to talk to it.
Let's go over to our Macintosh again. So here I'm now, I guess it's ! or H
Yes.
for help. So that first screen full of commands is what I might set in a configuration file or on the options line, right?
That's correct, yeah.
But this other set of commands is now I'm in the Platform Assistant server, and I have a few things that I can do, like get the IP address, for example.
That's correct.
This PAServer is connected to the IDE, and they have to be compatible with each other, right?
The version number at least has to be yeah, that's correct. The version number has to be compatible.
So if I started my exe8 PAServer 16.0 and I tried to talk from this Rad Studio 10 Seattle 17.0 IDE, it would tell me there's a mismatch, right?
What we did will be, we'll tell you there's a mismatch, and we will attempt to copy your new PAServer into your scratch there, but it's up to you whether you want to install them or not so that your Seattle ID can talk to it.
Okay, so P gives me the port number. Well, that's not hard. S will give me the scratch directory. So there's my scratch directory. It's in my user area. My logon is David I. So that's where we find things, right?
Yes.
So now if I go over here, users, David I, and then I have to go to PAServer. There it is, right? And there's my scratch dir. So this is where there's files, right?
Yeah, so when you look at this is a catch directory. So basically this is for SDK. The first two directories for the SDK that being used when you pull your SDK file.
So that's the 8.4, and that looks like, because of the date, that's probably the 9.0.
80152 is basically the version number of a PAServer that's running at the time.
Okay.
That you use to connect to this PAServer.
Okay.
And then the David I, that will be your username and profile name. That will be all your program that you have been deployed to that machine so far.
So this is, I had a parallel C++11 Lambda demo, so that's the application file.
Yes.
And this is the, what is that, debug symbol?
The debug symbol file of that application, yeah.
Okay, and I was doing some things with Bluetooth devices.
So far, look like you have a 3 app being deployed into this machine at this moment.
Yeah, just for some of the testing I was doing earlier. Is there anything else people should think about in the scratch dir? If there's some strange mismatch, empty the scratch dir and it gets rebuilt, or?
Yeah, if you for some reason you're thinking you think maybe you have something copy over there that you don't want to, you can go to the scratch directory, delete them all, and then we will recreate it for you. So you don't have to worry about you might by mistake deleting something extra, because every file, all these files actually is located in your Windows machine that we copy over to your Mac machine, so you'll be fine.
Okay. This one, toggle verbose mode. When would I use that?
We use that just to help us to say, for example, if you do you did something and then you say, oops, it doesn't work, whatever. Sometime when you call tech support, we probably would like to ask you, okay, could you type the V so that all the command being sent over to your Mac machine, we ask you to report it back to us so we know exactly what's being done, so why it doesn't work, this kind of stuff.
Okay, and then if you've written some bad applications that are that are crashing or hung somewhere, and you want to clear everything out,
you just type R reset, will just wipe it out from your device, and then also wipe out from the current Mac process too. So that means everything will be cleaned up. In the worst case, you can shut down PAServer if you need to, but we try not to. That's why we put the R command in there.
Okay. Before I used to shut down the PAServer, go under my Apple and kill some of the running processes. Yeah.
Yeah. This is much easier, so you have to shut down your PAServer.
Yeah. Okay, and then there's the PAServer Manager. So tell everyone, what is the PAServer Manager?
This PAServer Manager, at one point users say, okay, I would like to run like the PAServer 16.0 for XE8 or XE7, this kind of stuff. So PAServer Manager allows you to define your PAServer for each version that you want, or you can define it for even the sim version of PAServer. You can run them to the UI itself, so you don't have to click onto the what you call that thing to find where your PAServer is located. You run the app in there, but you can run everything from PAServer.
Oh, okay, so that
from PAServer Manager, I mean.
So for me, I have a PAServer Manager alias, and again, it's just an application, so I can run it, and then it shows up under here.
You can add the server. Now you define the name that you want to be. You can call my PAServer.
Whatever.
Okay, now in the server itself, we give you like a 17 or 16. So basically, you can say my PAServer for 17.0 or something like that. So you know which version you're running.
Right. Give it a port, another port, and then I can manage them, turn on verbose mode.
Yeah, you can also manage your script folder too, because just in case you don't want to have all the different versions of PAServer copied to the same directory.
Okay. So it's a way of managing multiple instances of PAServers?
That's correct.
Okay. So these are just some bitmaps. These are from the doc wiki. So it gives you it reminds you, okay, I'm on my development environment. If I want to do Mac OS, I've got to put a platform assistant server on OS 10, which you saw over in the demo. For iOS, I need not only a Macintosh, but then I have my device or devices that are there. And so, again, the IDE that way can talk through the Mac to get to the device.
That's correct.
And then for Android, since we're all on Windows, it's just my device connected to my Windows machine, and all of this just happens. And that allows me to do debugging, deployment, running applications, stop a process, terminate, everything that you would do when you're building a Windows application and debugging it and running it.
Yeah, the idea will be we want to be everything as if you run within the Win32 itself. You don't even know whether this thing will be run in the Android or iOS or Macintosh. You don't even know that. So it just run behind the scene.
And then I just wanted to mention that because iOS 9 came out after we released, and El Capitan was just released on the 30th of September, there was a hotfix that we released, and it's available on Code Central. Just wanted to mention that.
Okay.
And I think, what does it do under the covers to just make sure that everything can work still, having the IDE talk to El Capitan and iOS 9?
Yeah, because this hotfix is for fixing because when you pull the file from the Mac onto the Windows machine, we need to, to translate correctly. So that's what this hotfix is for.
Okay. So again, you can find that on Code Central. Serena did a great blog that talks about what you need to do. So I'll make sure and have those links up for everybody online. But just go to the community .embarcadero.com, go to Serena's blog post, her blog, and you'll see that recent blog post on the hotfix for everyone to download it. Basically, you get 2 files that you copy over to your Macintosh, set the right privileges.
Yeah, that's a README in this hotfix too. So you follow that README to tell you how to copy these 2 extra files, how to set the attribute, this kind of stuff, and then you'll be fine.
Yep. One thing I wanted to talk about, but But I think what we'll do is go back for a moment to the IDE, and then we'll do a sample deployment and run, for example, to iOS.
Okay.
Because there's some things that can happen. There's notes in the doc wiki and in our tutorials about how do you make sure your Xcode is correct for the target devices you have, make sure your IDE is set up properly. And if not, you could get error messages, pop-ups inside of the IDE when you try to build or deploy an application that says something is out of sync. I know this happens to me whenever I upgrade to a new version of iOS and I don't follow all the steps, or I've updated my device, but my Xcode is older and I have to make sure to update my Xcode.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Because we have, if we're doing a multi-device development, I've chose my target project. I've got some code. I've set a breakpoint. The great thing is all these commands, the step into, trace into, step over, run, program pause, reset, all of these things are commands in the IDE, right? They don't care what I'm talking to.
Yeah.
So what I've done here is I've added a line of code to my C++ sample. Could have been a Delphi sample as well. I've put a breakpoint. I've got my iOS device. I'll choose the 32-bit, for example, here, or 64-bit, or Android, or Windows, and so on. And the great thing, iOS device, OS 10, again, configuration. Am I doing ad hoc or development? We don't give you a store app anymore because Apple doesn't allow 32-bit only store apps. We have to have 64-bit, but we can turn on 32 and 64-bit to create these fat binary apps.
That's correct.
So we're protecting you from yourself in that way that you can't submit a store app. So it used to be there was a store app choice there years ago, but not anymore.
No,
we
you
just
cannot
get rid
do
of
that
it
anymore. Yeah,
so
Apple doesn't allow that.
just trying to help you there. So, but the great thing now is from a development standpoint, all the same commands I'm used to, all the same hotkeys work. I can just hit run. I can hit run with debugging. I can trace into, step over, and so on. That's the great thing about once we've configured it all with the IDE, and if I need the PAServer or not, the developer experience, the debugging experience, the deployment execution experience is the same, right?
Same thing as in the normal Windows app, yeah.
So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this one button app and I'm going to run it with debugging, and we'll see a few things that'll happen. First, it's got to do the normal compile work. So it's compiling the sample program. It's linking it now, and then it will do a few more things. It's got to package up the app with all of the right images and icons and splash screen and all of those kinds of things. And now it's doing deploy, so there's some work going on, right? Between the
we
IDE.
copy all this file to the remote machine, to your Mac machine at this point, and we could sign them, and then now we launch them right now.
So now over on my Macintosh side, I've got this software I use called Reflector App, and it's by Squirrel Software, and it lets you see what is happening in the webinar. It lets you see what I'm seeing on my device. So I can click the button. And so now it looks like my app is kind of hung because I've tapped on the button. Remember, I set a breakpoint. So we go back into the IDE, and now I'm at my breakpoint, right?
Yeah.
So under the covers, in the event log, in the message window, and so on, everything has happened like we would expect it to happen. We've loaded a bunch of modules, in this case, a bunch of things that are needed as part of that application. All of this are commands, what, going from the IDE over to the Mac?
Yeah, from the IDE, we talk to the PAServer, to the Mac, and then we launch your app, in the debug mode, and then we start the debug session on the Mac machine. And then from the Mac machine itself, they talk to the server on your device. And as the device is running, they load all the modules, they send all the information back to the IDE. That's why we show you in the event log windows here. And now, as the program's running, and then it hit the breakpoint, so the device server tells the PAServer, hey, the breakpoint is hit, and then that PAServer tell the IDE back that the breakpoint is hit, and then we show you what the breakpoint is.
What I usually do at this point is I bring up CPU Viewer to show people that I'm on an ARM processor instead of an Intel processor. These are ARM instructions. These are ARM registers.
Too, yeah.
So it just makes it easier. to point out that now we're running real native code and it's running on this device, and the IDE communicated to the PAServer on the Mac, which communicated to the debug kernel that's in the iOS device, right?
Yes.
Okay. And from there, I can do other things like I could see the value of that pop-up variable. I haven't assigned to it yet, so it started as button 1. So I can hover hint to get the value of things. I can go through the this pointer and find the button that's available and watch variables and step through code and so on. In this case, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time debugging. I'll just hit run again. And then if I come back to my Mac, notice that the screen, it executed that statement, which again, my app just changed the button caption to 42 with an exclamation point, and it's all good that way. So a couple of the things I wanted to point to that are happening under the covers, we talked about it a little bit, is what else the PAServer is doing and what do we have to set up for the IDE. So one of those things is project options, and there's this little thing called provisioning, right? And depending on the settings, so for example, for development, what's happening here? It looks like it's picking up my provisioning profile.
Yeah, so what we did will be like we go to your Mac machine, we look at all the provision profile that you already download into that machine, and then depending on the configuration that you choose, for example, in this case, you choose like a 32-bit development, we will try to pull, if you have such provision profile, all the provision profile for development type. So that will be all the provision profile that we pull onto your Windows machine. So in this case, if you, by default, we say auto, so that means we will try to select one for you. So if you expand this, you'll see all these are all the provision profile that can be used for your app to debug or to run without debugging.
And these are valid provisioning profiles, right?
It depends. So for example, if you click on, this will be the valid provision profile, but some of them might not have the, what you call it, certificate with the provision profile.
Okay.
So
there could be some problem, but it looks like everything's okay. I have another one for push notification because that's a specific.
Yeah, why don't we click on it and see what it looks like. When you click on the push that one, and then developer certificate, you happen to have one, you click on it, please. And then unable to, okay, so in this case, we give you an error. So because your bundle ID is not correct, then you have to fix your bundle ID. So we will tell you, based on what provision profile you choose, we will tell you what's wrong. If you need to fix one, you fix it. So.
And then one other thing is, can I set a default for my use of the IDE for provisioning profiles?
Yeah.
And certificates?
Usually what we do, we go from the tool option. In the tool option provision profile, if you want to say, I want all this, this provision file for all your project, you set it from the tools option.
Okay, so for like 64-bit application development, I wanted to use my generic one, for example.
Yes.
And then it'll be there for any time I create a new project.
We will try to use this provision profile.
Okay, so that's a way of setting global provisioning profiles for the different targets, right?
That's correct.
And again, all of this seems complicated, and the parts for me that are more complicated have to do with the Apple side, where I've got to go to my developer portal and make sure I have the right provisioning profile options for my app, get my certificates, bring all that down, provision my devices, make sure my Xcode knows about all my devices and provisioning profiles, right?
Well, for your okay, so you go to Apple site, like you said, like you define your certificate, and then you define your provision profile. But right now, in the Seattle, you no longer need to provision the device anymore. We will do it for you automatically. So we remove that step from you.
Okay. But this is a way of setting a global, so you don't have to go project by project unless you want to use a different provisioning profile.
That's correct.
Right. So I'll save that one in there because that's something that I use a lot. The other thing that we'll do for iOS is there's this project deployment where we can set the artwork images. I can set my info P list. If I've got some other files, some images, a database file or whatever, I can add additional files that I want to deploy along with my application. Maybe it's some JPEGs or some other kinds of data elements that I want as part of my application.
Yeah, if you have some extra file that you want to deploy, yeah,
like an INI file or something like that.
Yes.
Then I add these in here, and what the development environment packages all those up and links those to create the application file.
We deploy everything into your Mac machine, and then if you run with or without debugging, we do not package it for you, but we could sign it for you. But when you want to have the final product to create the IPA file, then we'll package it for you.
Okay. So if I'm doing a store app where you want to have an IPA to upload,
yeah, at that time we package it for you.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. And so PAServer is involved in this as well, as far as deploying the right files depending on my target configuration?
Yeah, deploying the file is through PAServer. So the IDE asks the PAServer to say, hey, I want to deploy this file over to the Mac machine. After they're done, so if you want to go to Apple Store or ad hoc build type, the IDE will ask the PAServer, hey, package this thing for me to generate an IPA file for me.
Okay. Now, let me go in. I want to see, during the build process, so for example, if I choose, what was one of those bad, not ad hoc development, what was it, this one maybe?
Choose the one that doesn't have the, okay, you can choose this one.
Like this one, for example. Now what you're saying is it'll tell me, right, that there's something wrong?
Something wrong, yes.
Okay. So I have to go do something to...
In this case, like unable to match your bundle identifier with the app ID bundle identifier, so you have to fix them.
So something like this, and there's one that seems to be okay.
Yeah, this one is okay.
Now doing a deploy, if I want to try and do a deploy, can I do something like deploy here or?
Yeah, you can deploy from here. You just click on the deploy icon in there. Now we will copy the file to your Mac machine.
Okay, and that'll be in my Scratcher.
In your Scratcher.
Okay, so I can go and run it from there if I wanted to just try it out quickly or.
That's correct.
Okay. There's lots, again, I bring this slide back up, and there's lots on this slide, but this is all in the doc wiki and in the online help about how to make sure that you've set some of the right things when you want to set up and build your application. Make sure you have you've set a device family, you've got some version info, that you've got the right provisioning profiles and certificates, as we've mentioned. If for some reason, you're trying to deploy to a simulator, but, you haven't connected to the right simulator for a Delphi app, right? Then these are some of the things that could give you an error during the deploy time, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And there's this help file that pops up when you're inside the IDE. I'm not sure how to trigger one now because I've set up everything, I think, correctly, unless we create some havoc over on my Mac or on the devices.
One example would be, say you update your device to iOS 9, but you forgot to update your Xcode on your Mac machine to Xcode 7.
Yep.
So in this case, we get an error. So when you get an error, IDE will pop up this error. This will be called IDE PAServer deploy error dialog box. And then we give you all the code in there to tell you what you need to fix. So if you don't see your code or anything in here, you might need to scroll down the windows a little bit. We have more information underneath that will help you to fix your problem. Okay.
And so again, the classic one is the first one, the 80000E. It's just telling you, hey, you're trying to connect to a device, but you don't have the right Xcode over on your Macintosh.
That's correct.
Yep. Okay. And again, all of those are there. I think I have a link to that help file somewhere here. Let's see. Oh, here we go. So this is the doc wiki page, but in the IDE, it'll pop up a window in the development deploy IDE environment that lists the specific error you got. And underneath it, it'll have, again, this list of errors and some of the things you can do about it. Okay. I could probably trigger one if I put minimum iOS version, change that or something.
Yeah, if you change that, you'll see this number.
So let's go back to hold on. So let's go back to the IDE, and where's that? That's in project options. Is it version info?
No, I think in the linking. The C++ linker.
Okay.
And then right now
the minimum iOS version. Okay. So I want to trigger one of those errors. So I'm going to go, I'm running 9.0.2. So I'm going to put 9.5 as the minimum iOS version. And then if I click run, deploy, it does the linking. Great. It's doing what it needs to do. It's communicating. It's using the provisioning profile down here. You see in the message window, using provisioning profile. Now a bunch of PA client commands. What are those PA client? That's where the IDE is communicating to the PA server?
Yeah, that's what you just call to deploy all the app, all the file back to the Mac machine. So now you see this error saying like a 78007E.
Here it is, 7E. Yeah. But what you're saying is underneath the covers, I have to scroll down.
If you don't see it in the top of this thing, you might want to scroll down because we have like a item number 9 or whatever that give you more information.
Yeah. So it gives me the error pop up here, and then it says, okay, unable to install package 7E, please check certificates validity, provisioning, and so on. But we just scroll this pop-up window down, and it says your iOS device version is lower than the default minimum value. And I remember we set it to 9.5. I'm only running 9.0.2. Yeah. So this is very helpful. They're all listed in the doc wiki as well, but you know, everything is, we're keeping track of what's going on, and there was some error deploying. You know, I wanted to mention, we don't have to go into all these, but under here in the message window, we could see, right, all of these PA client calls. That's the IDE talking to the PA server?
Yes.
So what, that last one is probably the one that gets some error?
The last one, basically,
it was trying to do a code sign here.
We're doing code sign. There's no error in this case, success, right? So we code sign the whole app itself.
We code signed, but we couldn't run it. We couldn't deploy it, right?
Yeah.
So it did the code signing. And again, over on the command line tools for Xcode on the Mac, we have to install the right Xcode and also make sure the command line tools are installed and updated.
That's correct.
And so in the build process, is code signing the only thing? What else do we need from Xcode besides provisioning profile certificates and those things? The code sign tool, right?
We run the code sign tool, yeah.
Okay.
Also, like we get all the Xcode SDK stuff. So
okay.
That's why we
when I'm doing that SDK manager and so on. But otherwise, is there anything special to this? Is where it's getting the provisioning. Is there anything that is worth looking at in these PA client command calls in the message window?
If there's an error, you might want to open it to see what command that triggers the error. Otherwise, you should probably don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, like I guess here, artwork.
Just copying the file.
You know, if I had something wrong in my artwork, for example, or something, you know, who knows what might pop up in an error.
Yeah, like file doesn't exist or something like that.
Like I said, deploy some file and it can't deploy that file.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah. Like an INI file to package it up and so on. And then I guess the last thing here. The IDE is building the application, so somewhere on my computer, in the case of this test PA server, there's also a folder, right, that has subfolders for my builds.
Yeah, when do we open it so we can?
So here we are in this is where my PA server is, and I've got a couple directories. I've only built for iOS 32 and 64. So here, and I only did debug build.
That's correct. So if you open it, then there will be all the file that we compile for you, and then this is just some file that we created on the fly, but there's like an icon file or other file that we also copy over to the Mac machine that doesn't show up in here. So if you want to look at a complete file of what the thing that we installed to your device, you might want to go to the Mac machine to see.
Okay, so let's go over to the Mac, and again, it's my Scratchter in David I users. So I go down to PAServer, and it was the Samwise Gamgee, and this is my test PAServer. What, show package contents?
Yes.
Okay, so
now
here
you will
is
see all this file being copied over to your machine.
So here is what's that, code sign?
Code sign is because when we code sign your file, the Apple will generate the code sign signature in there.
And here's all my different icons and my screen images. That are
we also show you, like, if you go up a little bit, that's embedded proficient, mobile proficient. That will be the proficient profile that you use for this particular project. So we will use this proficient profile to provision your device if we need to.
Okay, and then here's my executable. Again, that's the PAServer executable, info plist, and so on. So all of that gets deployed into my Scratch directory through the ID, through the PA server,
server.
and then eventually shows up on my iPhone
That's correct.
or my Android phone or my OS 10 device or whatever.
That's correct.
Okay, so we've been demonstrating all along the way. I'm going to put these on a blog post. There's a bunch of links to additional information about the PAServer, building applications and installing the platform assistant on Windows and running it on Windows, running it on Mac, on iOS, and some of the errors that might happen. So there's a lot of information in the help and the doc wiki. And so with that, we'll now turn it over to your questions. And we've got myself and Hin here. So let's go and take care of the questions. Okay, we're here in the C++ studio. It's great to have you with us. And we'll get to a few of the questions here. Just make sure. There's one question. And I'm just waiting for Hin to join me as well. Just a quick moment. He was here, and then he had to go do something over in R&D. But put questions in the Q&A log. One thing to make sure, and I talked about this along the way, is when new versions of iOS come out or new versions of Xcode, if you're supporting older versions of, let's say, iOS or OS 10, make sure you keep those SDKs around from the different versions of Xcode and iOS and so on, because you'll want to be able to link and build with those versions of the libraries and so on that are associated with versions. I was just mentioning Hin's just joined me. Hey, Hin. Okay. Hin is just joining me. Hi, Hin.
Hi.
I was just mentioning that if you were thinking about, Apple comes out with new versions of iOS, OS 10 comes out with new versions of Xcode, but if you want to support past versions of iOS and OS 10, you'll want to make sure you keep those SDKs around and cached on our side, and not delete those things over the Mac if you want to go back, because if you go to the new versions, you might not be able to see the pull down to select an SDK like I had. I kept my 8.4 over on my system and on my Macintosh side, right?
Okay, yeah.
That's key if you want to support going back. Now, in some cases, iOS or OS 10, if you build your app with the newer versions of SDKs, Apple will tell you whether or not you can use those when you give them to somebody on older devices or older machines. I know, for example, some older devices, you can't get some of the new features and APIs. You've got to keep using iOS 7 or 8. But now in the store, for example, you can't get those. You can't put those apps in the store. You've got to have this fat binary or universal app now.
Yeah.
And we have options. I don't know if I didn't show that, but there's an option for both C++ and Delphi compilers to build those fat binaries or universal apps where it's 3264.
32 and 64-bit, yeah.
The other thing I didn't show in this case, because we have separate sessions where we talked about in skill sprints, building apps. I think Pavel Glavatsky a week or so ago, check out the skill sprint landing page of how to get your apps ready and put them into both the App Store and the Google Play Store and the Amazon Store. So if you target under the build configuration and the build target, the App Store, for example, in an iOS app, then we'll generate an IPA file, right?
That's correct, yeah. We generate IPA file, then we will, in the Mac machine, then we copy over to your Windows machine so you can see them.
Because we went over to my Scratch directory and I saw the app, but since I saw the app itself, I didn't create a store app, so I didn't see an IPA file.
Yeah. If you just development only, we'll create the app bundle only. But if you generate ad hoc or store, we will generate the IPA file for you.
Okay. Is the IPA file also on my Windows machine under the subdirectories like I had the iOS 32 debug?
Yes.
So instead of debug, I'd see ad hoc or app store as subfolders as well?
In the debug, that directory, you will see the .IPA file itself, yeah.
And again, the same process whether I do a debug build or a release build. There'd be two subfolders under each device, one debug, one release.
Yeah.
And then under there.
Yeah, when you build for the release, we'll go to release directory. When you build for debug, we'll go to debug directory. And then if you build the App Store or ad hoc, we will also generate the IPA file for you.
Okay.
We can also copy into your Windows directory too.
Okay. And let me make sure and go over to the question specific area. Oh, this was a question Ilya's asking. Does the latest version of PAServer work with earlier Delphi versions? This is that synchronization between the IDE and the PAServer,
I
right?
see. Okay. Whenever I update the version number, so if it doesn't work, the IDE will tell you, okay, this version is not compatible. So the IDE will tell you that.
Okay, and you saw in my system, I had two PA servers, 16.0, 17.0. The 16.0 is synchronized with the XZ8 product. Right?
That's correct.
So if I have it, so there's no way, if I'm using XZ8 IDE, there's no way to use PAServer 17, or can I?
XZ8 XZ8 IDE cannot talk to the XZ9 or XZ10 is the Seattle IDE. Yes.
Yeah.
You cannot. Yeah.
Yeah. So each of these, and you'll get that message if you try to have, if the IDE on the TCP/IP port tries to connect to a mismatched PA server.
Yeah. We will give you an error, say there's a type mismatch, and then you have to do something about it to make sure you point to the correct one.
Okay. So, and we keep those synchronized, and whether there's a hot fix, that's fine. But as we move forward, if we update the IDE that causes the PA server to have to handle new things, then again, they're version dependent, right? The IDE is matched with the PA server.
Yeah, the way we update for sure every release we will have a new PA server, but within an update of a release, we may choose to keep this, make sure the PA server is compatible, but we may not, depend on what kind of fixes we have to apply to that PA server. So.
And again, as you saw, the PAServer installers for Windows and for Mac, the package file and the exe, those are in a subfolder off the bin folder. So if you have your past versions, exe6, exe7, each of those also has a bin folder. In the bin folder has a PAServer folder where you can install. So you could have on your Mac 5 different
as many versions as you need
of PAServer,
so
right? As many as you need.
Yeah.
And the PAServer Manager is that easy way through the pull down to choose which ones.
For a newer version of PA, for its release of PAServer Manager, it will keep track of how many older version of PAServer that we have that allow you to launch them from that.
So in my case, that was just, I kept 2. I didn't keep previous ones. So the 16 version 16.0 and 17.0.
Okay.
Okay. So those are all the questions for now. Hin, thank you for both spending the time with me as we put this together. It was very fun. I got to ask some of my favorite questions along the way and make some mistakes, which I cut out. But keep doing all the great work. I know you're going to come back a little later. I think it's at noon. We have the talking about debugging multi-device apps, right? But we have a couple sessions before then that I need to move on to. But thank you.
Okay, thank you.